What if everything your organization thinks about hybrid work is focused on the wrong questions? Professor Lynda Gratton has spent 30 years researching workplace transformation at London Business School, and her findings challenge conventional thinking. Today, she reveals why focusing on tasks instead of locations could transform your hybrid strategy and boost both productivity and satisfaction.
Well, it's interesting because one of the big questions about working in a hybrid way is, am I being productive? But it turns out that particularly when we look at cognitive work, the sort of work that many of us do, is incredibly difficult to know whether we're being productive or indeed to measure it. And we asked a question on a webinar, tell me about when you're feeling productive. And people talked about, I feel as if I'm really energized. I feel as if I'm in flow. I really feel as if I'm being incredibly creative. And you had all these human descriptions of productivity. And yet, when we looked at organizational measures, they were things like how much time you spent on something, how much time you were spending in general. And so what we sort of saw was a real difference between the human side of productivity and the operational side of productivity. Measuring productivity has always been difficult. It's not that hybrid has created a problem. It's really bringing to the surface a challenge that we were facing already. Well, one of the points that I made when I looked at hybrid work and I wrote a book, Redesigning Work, is that we should really focus on the tasks that we're doing. And that will give us, I think, some good insights into what the outcomes could be. So actually stand back and ask the question, what is it that this person is doing to be successful in their job? And, when you do that, then you start leading with the job.
By focusing on the specific tasks that make up each role, leaders can make more objective decisions about where and how work happens.
What's interesting about hybrid is it really began during the beginning of the pandemic, and I called that the freeze and the refreeze. But what's really interesting is that rather than freezing into one type of working environment, it's frozen into many, many different varieties. It's almost as if, you've got us 20, 30 snowflakes, all of which look entirely different. And I think because of that, it's hard for managers to really get a handle on, is what I'm doing right? There's no point in pretending the deal is X when it's actually Y. If you want people in the office 5 days a week, I think that's perfectly reasonable, but that's the deal. And you need to be very explicit about what the deal is and also have a reason about why you think it's important. And also to realize that when we think about hybrid, it's not just about flexibility about place, it's also about flexibility in time. There may be people who don't have any flexibility around place, but actually could be much more flexible around time.
Clear communication about expectations creates the foundation for effective hybrid work. But beyond policy, Gratton suggests that hybrid work offers a more fundamental opportunity.
When we think about all the things that are changing work, and the possibility of working from home and hybrid is one, generative AI is another, working with 5 generations in the workplace, all of these external events, as it were, impact on the job itself. And I think it's time that we redesigned work. We redesigned the job itself, because otherwise what we're doing is we're trying to force the job into, a different mold, which it doesn't fit at all. So actually stand back and ask the question, what is it that this person is doing to be successful in their job? And, when you do that, then you start leading with the job. For example, if I look at my job, a major task of my job is writing. And so for me, the most important thing is that I am undisturbed, that I can sit for 3 hours at a time in an undisturbed way. I could do that at home or I could do that in the office, but that's the most important thing. Other people have jobs where cooperating with them. For example, let's imagine they're in a design agency or an architectural agency where For some of the time, they really need to brainstorm some great ideas. They need to see each other. They need to look at models. They need to think about innovative ways of solving problems. There's a lot to be said for doing that face-to-face. So that would be part of the job design, to say, okay, when we come into the office, what we're doing is we're doing something really exciting. What I think has drained a lot of energy for people is when they've been asked to come into the office when all they're doing is working on their emails. So this question of why am I here is a really important one. When you think about the design of work, you design from the task rather than what were your old preconceptions of what the job is.
This perspective transforms hybrid work from a simple location decision into a chance to fundamentally rethink how jobs are structured.
That gives you much more creativity and also allows people to think about redesigning their work. When people have a chance to redesign their own work, that's a very motivating experience for them, and they feel a lot more purposeful as a result of that. It can be extremely energizing to design your own work. So, for example, if you know that being focused is really important to you, and you know that you need 3 hours of undisturbed time, you're much more likely to have the confidence to say to people, back off. I now need 3 hours to work because I know that that's going to be productive. One of the major problems I see when I teach executives at London Business School is busyness. They're doing far too many things. They've got far too many meetings. So it's really important that you give people an opportunity to think about what makes me best, what helps me to be a high performer, and then to design their job around delivering that.
When employees understand what makes them effective in their roles, they gain the confidence to protect those conditions. Many organizations could benefit from establishing what Gratton calls red lines, non-negotiable principles that cannot be compromised, regardless of how hybrid work is implemented.
A red line is something that says, when we're designing hybrid work, this is the line across which we do not step. So, for example, one of the companies we're advising said the red line is this whatever design we come up with cannot reduce customer satisfaction. And if it does that, it's a red line. As always, leaders set a very important tone, both about the narrative they give, but also about, the role modeling that they have. And so to try and work through their own behavior with regard to what they want the organization to do is going to be really important. So I'd certainly look to our leaders to role model the sort of behaviors you want. For example, if you want people in the office to be cooperating and collaborating, then the leader needs themselves to be role modeling that.
Professor Gratton's research reveals that successful hybrid work depends on 4 key principles. 1. Focus on job tasks rather than personal preferences. 2. Be transparent about expectations. 3. Empower employees to design their work for maximum performance. And finally, 4. Identify your organization's non-negotiables. To learn more about effective hybrid work strategies, read Lynda Gratton's article, 7 Truths About Hybrid Work and Productivity, on the MIT SMR website. The link is in the description below. And for more insights from our authors, check out this curated playlist. Thanks for watching.